Here's an important skill that you might not have considered that is, I think, right in front of us for our kids as we try to influence them to have everything that they need to do well in life. And the question is this, that we want kids to be able to answer this question. How do you repair relationships? When things get wrong, when things get off track, when feelings are hurt or a story has been created, oftentimes what we see in our kids is the breakdown of their relationships. It's hard to watch sometimes. It's cringeworthy. And where else, though, are they going to learn about how to resolve conflict than from us? If your kid got into a fight with a friend, maybe said something they regret, excluded a friend from hanging out with others, or maybe they even felt hurt by what a friend did, said, didn't do, didn't say, does your kid know what to do next so that it leads to repair? Most kids don't, of course. Most adults don't. And we know that conflict is inevitable. But what matters more than avoiding it or hoping that our kids just figure it out later is learning how to teach them to repair. And that's what we're going to get into in this episode. If your kid doesn't learn how to repair relationships, they'll carry conflict avoidance, resentment, people pleasing maybe into every part of their life: school, sports, maybe their relationships, marriage, even their work someday. Conflict is a part of growing up, of course. It's a part of life. You can't avoid it. It's hard to go more than a week or a month without, especially today, kids getting into a conflict with one another. But for many kids, their only tool is either to avoid it or to lash out or to kind of ice people out, like ghost them, pretend it never happened. And this isn't necessarily disrespectful. It's an opportunity for us to step in and guide them. It's just evidence of their inexperience in it. According to research in social emotional learning and adolescent development, conflict resolution is a learned skill set. It's not an automatic instinct. And most kids today haven't had enough reps or seen it modeled enough to know what to do about it. We're raising our kids today in a world of echo chambers where people are lobbing huge insults at one another, whether it's politics or sports. Whatever they're seeing on the news or on social media is by and large unhealthy pictures of how to resolve conflict. They haven't watched many adults apologize well, own mistakes, listen to one another, kind of go through the difficult parts of conflict resolution. They haven't seen healthy disagreements and debate that end with more trust, not with less. And in the age of screens, it's easier than ever to avoid than to engage. So zooming out, if a kid never learns how to repair relationships, there's so many things that are at stake that are important. They might then always have shallow or short-term relationships. They might build up resentment and avoid vulnerability and make that a part of a pattern, a habit that they have. They might just develop an overall fear of confrontation that might carry into their marriage or their parenting or their work. And they might just stay stuck in either patterns of lashing out, patterns of cutting friends out, or patterns of avoidance and just never learning how to own their voice and name their feelings and step into those uncomfortable conversations. But on the flip side, if you can teach a kid to walk through conflict resolution, take ownership, seek to understand, repair relationships, they become the best kind of people. They then have the foundation to navigate hard things, hard relationships, and lead others. They become trustworthy, humble, courageous, not people who run from conflict, but they lean in with maturity. And they have the capacity to build relationships that are deep enough to weather the complexities of life, to weather the storms. So how do we teach that? What does it look like? It's not just saying sorry. It's not just saying, hey, you hurt my feelings. It's learning to teach our kids to, number one, name what happened. Number two, own their part without making excuses. Like actually take ownership, humility, self-awareness. Go through the perspective taking of acknowledging how the other person might have felt, regardless of who's right, who's wrong. Asking open-ended questions like, what do you need from me in order for us to repair? And then learning how to rebuild trust through consistent behavior. That's an overall picture of how do you teach kids how to repair relationships, conflict resolution skills, owning things, leaning forward with humility and openness, and then consistently moving forward towards reconciliation. These are skills that, of course, need to be practiced before they're perfect. You don't just wake up one day. This isn't just a workshop you do or a 60-second reel on Instagram that you learn from, although that can be helpful. But we as parents can, first of all, model that in our home. They might not see the conflicts that we get into. They might hear us, hang up the phone after talking to someone, a family member maybe, and just kind of berate that person or criticize or complain. Or they might see us have patterns of deflection, excuse making, saying hurtful things. They might see us go straight to text messaging when we're in a conflict rather than try to see somebody face to face. So our kids are watching us, and it's important to pay attention to that and maybe even share stories about how over time you've engaged in conflict and it's led to healthy relationships. I know I've told my kids a story so many times about getting into a conflict with a good friend of mine right around college graduation, a long time ago. But I had my feelings hurt. And instead, I remember my first instinct was to say, I guess we're not going to be friends anymore. I'm just going to pull back. I don't know. I don't like that feeling, and I just can't trust him. And instead, a little voice in my head said, no, it's time to figure this out. And I approached him and shared my perspective, my experience, my feelings. And he responded in the most delightful way. By laughing, actually. He's like, oh my gosh, we're like in a fight. This is awesome. He's like, this is what I do with my brothers. I've never done this outside my family. And it was that moment I can point back to that solidified a foundation of one of the most meaningful friendships in my life. I've told that story to my kids. I want them to see and hear from me and learn from me how to do this well. And then when they get into a conflict, ask them to, after they've been able to kind of name their feelings, after you've spent some time validating, that makes sense that you feel that way. Oh my gosh, yeah. Then after they've done that, after they feel fully understood by you, ask them to consider another perspective, to try to put themselves in the other person's shoes, to even play a narrator of the story. What would a narrator say? If you can kind of like zoom out and see the whole picture. And then invite them to make moves. Say something that we value in our family is when it's appropriate to repair relationships, repair harm. Either if you've been the one who's harmed or the one who's been harmed. And quite usually it's both. There's elements of both. And ultimately that we would want to praise them and encourage them to take any sort of movement towards repair, even if the result doesn't go well, because you cannot control how the other person acts or responds. Overall, we can't protect our kids from conflict, and we shouldn't, because conflict is oftentimes the portal. It's the threshold to the good stuff, real relationship, vulnerability, understanding, and true belonging, which is a big, huge ingredient to what we want for our kids as we help raise them to have a meaningful life. So instead of avoiding it, instead of lashing out, let's ask our kids this week this question: what's your style of repairing relationships when they're on rocky ground? And ask them to come up with their own version of that, come up with their own understanding, their own steps to take, because ultimately they're going to be leading their own lives. And so we can model it, but it's up to them. We'll be back next week with another episode of the U School Podcast.